Stop scrolling for a second, because most men have misunderstood female attraction their entire lives. Not because they're stupid, not because women are too complicated, but because women rarely show attraction the way men expect them to. Men look for obvious signals. Women usually communicate attraction through awareness, positioning, energy, and small emotional behaviors most guys completely overlook. If you've ever walked away from an interaction wondering whether a woman liked you, or whether you imagined the entire thing, you're not alone. In fact, one of the biggest mistakes men make is assuming attraction should always be obvious. They expect clear flirting, direct compliments, or unmistakable signs. But female attraction often operates very differently. It tends to reveal itself through subtle patterns, repeated behaviors, and emotional cues that are easy to miss if you don't know what you're looking for. And before we dive into today's conversation, I want you to do something. Comment your city below and let me know where you're watching from. I always love seeing how far this community reaches. And while you're down there, tell me honestly, have you ever found out months or even years later that a woman was interested in you, but you completely missed the signs at the time? Trust me, you're not the only one. Those stories are more common than you think, and reading them helps everyone realize they're not alone in this experience. I'm Mary Smith, host of Senior Mindful Living YouTube channel. One of the most fascinating things about attraction psychology is that many people spend years searching for complicated answers, when the truth is often much simpler. Human beings constantly communicate emotions without speaking. We communicate through body language, attention, focus, eye contact, physical positioning, and emotional responsiveness. Women are no exception. In fact, many women communicate attraction in ways that feel natural and safe, rather than direct and obvious. Think about it for a moment. Imagine a woman notices a man she finds attractive. Is she likely to walk straight over and announce her feelings? Sometimes, but most of the time, especially in everyday situations, attraction begins with observation. She notices him first. She becomes aware of him. She watches how he interacts with other people. She studies his energy before deciding whether she wants to engage further. That brings us to the first sign, lingering eye contact. Now, this may sound simple, but there's a reason psychologists have studied eye contact for decades. Eye contact is one of the most powerful forms of nonverbal communication. It creates connection, awareness, and emotional recognition. Picture yourself sitting in a coffee shop. You glance across the room and notice a woman looking in your direction. For a brief moment, your eyes meet. That's normal. But then something different happens. Instead of immediately looking away, she holds eye contact for just a second longer than expected. Not long enough to feel uncomfortable, just long enough to feel noticeable. Then she looks away. A few moments later, you look again, and there she is, looking back. That second glance is where many men miss the message. Because psychologically, repeated attention usually indicates curiosity. The first glance might be accidental. The second often isn't. I once spoke with a man who told me he believed women were never interested in him during his younger years. Then years later, a female friend admitted she had a huge crush on him. When he asked why she never said anything, she laughed and replied, "I looked at you constantly." His response? "I thought you were just staring into space." That story is surprisingly common. Women often communicate interest through awareness before they communicate it through words. And here's something important. Attraction isn't necessarily about perfection. It's not always about being the tallest man, the richest man, or the most physically attractive man in the room. Sometimes attraction begins because a woman feels curious about your energy. Something about you captures her attention and she wants to know more. The second sign is proximity. This one is incredibly powerful because it often happens subconsciously. Human beings naturally move toward what feels emotionally rewarding. We position ourselves closer to people we enjoy, and farther away from people we don't. Women frequently express attraction through proximity because it allows interaction opportunities without requiring direct vulnerability. Imagine you're attending a social gathering. You notice a woman joins the same group conversation you're already part of. Later, she happens to be nearby again. Then she chooses the seat next to yours. Then somehow, during another interaction, she's standing within conversation distance once more. Most men dismiss these moments as coincidence. Sometimes they are. But repeated proximity often isn't. Psychologists refer to something called the familiarity effect. The more frequently we encounter someone in a positive environment, the more comfortable and connected we tend to feel. Many women instinctively understand this. Instead of forcing an interaction, they create opportunities for interaction. The difference matters. She's not chasing. She's creating space where connection can happen naturally. And honestly, that's often how attraction develops in healthy ways. Not through pressure, not through manipulation, but through repeated moments of comfortable familiarity. The third sign is focused attention when you speak. Now, this is where attraction becomes much deeper than appearance, because while looks may capture initial attention, presence captures sustained attention. Have you ever met someone who wasn't the loudest person in the room, yet somehow people naturally listened when they spoke? That's presence. And women notice it immediately. A man with genuine presence doesn't need to dominate conversations. He doesn't constantly seek validation. He doesn't compete for every ounce of attention. Instead, he speaks with calm certainty. His words feel intentional. His energy feels grounded. And that creates something incredibly attractive psychologically. Let's consider a real-life example. Imagine two men at a gathering. The first man talks constantly. He's trying to impress everyone. He interrupts. He exaggerates stories. He works hard to maintain attention. The second man speaks less often. But when he does speak, people naturally lean in. Why? Because calm confidence tends to create trust. Women often respond strongly to emotional steadiness because emotional steadiness signals security. As people mature, this becomes even more important. Many women eventually discover that excitement alone isn't enough. They start valuing reliability, consistency, emotional intelligence, and grounded confidence. That's why a calm man can often attract more genuine interest than a man performing confidence without actually feeling secure inside. The fourth sign is mirroring, and this is one of the most fascinating behaviors in attraction psychology. Most people don't realize they're doing it. In fact, mirroring often happens entirely below conscious awareness. Here's how it works. You cross your arms. A few moments later, she crosses hers. You lean forward. She leans forward. You smile. She smiles back. Your speaking pace slows. Her speaking pace gradually adjusts. Psychologists often view mirroring as a sign of rapport and emotional connection. Why? Because our brains naturally synchronize with people we feel comfortable around. It's almost like two nervous systems beginning to operate on a similar rhythm. Think about your closest friendships. You'll often notice similar speech patterns, body language, or mannerisms developing over time. The same process can happen during attraction. A woman who feels emotionally connected to you may begin reflecting your behaviors without realizing it. Not because she's trying to copy you, but because her mind feels engaged with yours. And here's something many men overlook. Mirroring is usually strongest when emotional comfort is present. This is important because female attraction is often deeply connected to emotional safety. A woman may find a man physically attractive, but emotional comfort is frequently what determines whether attraction continues growing. The fifth sign is when compliments become personal rather than physical. This is where attraction starts moving beneath the surface. Anyone can compliment appearance. Nice shirt. You look good. Great haircut. Those are pleasant comments, but attraction becomes more meaningful when a woman begins noticing qualities that have nothing to do with your appearance. Maybe she says, "You're easy to talk to. You make people feel comfortable. I like your energy. You have a calming presence. You always seem confident without trying too hard." Pay attention to those statements because they're revealing something deeper. They're revealing how she experiences you emotionally, and that's significant. Research consistently shows that emotional experiences often shape attraction more powerfully than isolated physical traits. People remember how someone made them feel. Think about the individuals you felt closest to throughout your life. Chances are, what stands out isn't their hairstyle or the clothes they wore. It's the feeling you experienced around them. Comfort, safety, excitement, understanding, connection. Women are no different. When a woman starts complimenting your character, your mindset, your presence, or the way she feels around you, she's often revealing that attraction is becoming emotional, rather than purely visual. And emotional attraction tends to last much longer. Now here's an important exercise I want every viewer to try this week. The next time you're speaking with someone, stop focusing entirely on what they're saying. Instead, observe how they engage. Do they lean in when you talk? Do they maintain eye contact? Do they remember small details from previous conversations? Do they seem genuinely interested in understanding you? These behaviors reveal far more about attraction than most people realize. Because attraction isn't always hidden inside grand gestures, Very often, attraction reveals itself through attention, through curiosity, through emotional investment. And as we continue, you're going to discover several more signs that are even more revealing than the ones we've discussed so far. In fact, the next signs are often the exact behaviors men dismiss as meaningless when they're actually some of the strongest indicators of attraction a woman can show without directly saying a word. And once you start recognizing them, you'll never look at social interactions the same way again. Let's continue because the next signs are often the ones that completely change how men understand female attraction. The sixth sign is repeated glances when you're not actively interacting with her. This behavior is surprisingly common, yet it's one of the most misunderstood attraction signals. Imagine you're at a social event. You're talking to someone else, completely focused on your own conversation. Then, out of the corner of your eye, you notice a woman looking at you. The moment you notice, she quickly looks away. A few minutes pass, it happens again, and then again later. Most men immediately dismiss this. They assume it's random. They tell themselves they're imagining things. But psychologically, human attention follows emotional interest. We naturally monitor the people who capture our curiosity. Think about your own life for a moment. When someone genuinely interests you, don't you find yourself paying attention to them even when you're not speaking directly? You notice where they are. You notice who they're talking to. You notice how they carry themselves. Women often do exactly the same thing. Many women prefer observation before interaction. They want to understand a man's personality, confidence level, emotional stability, and social behavior before deciding whether to become more openly engaged. This is especially true for women who are thoughtful, cautious, or naturally reserved. They're not simply evaluating appearance, they're evaluating character. And that's a distinction many men fail to recognize. A woman repeatedly looking toward you isn't always admiring your looks. Sometimes she's studying your energy. She's asking herself questions. How does he treat other people? Does he seem confident or arrogant? Does he make others comfortable? Is he emotionally mature? These silent observations often happen long before any romantic conversation begins. The seventh sign has less to do with the woman herself and more to do with how people respond to you around her. This is where social psychology becomes incredibly interesting. Human beings constantly gather information from social environments. Women are often highly aware of group dynamics, even when they aren't consciously analyzing them. They notice how other people react to certain men. For example, have you ever entered a room and noticed some men becoming slightly competitive around you? Or perhaps certain individuals immediately show you respect without needing a long explanation of who you are. Maybe people naturally seek your opinion during conversations. Maybe others listen when you speak. Women notice these patterns, not because they're calculating, but because social cues provide information. Confidence tends to leave a trace. Emotional security tends to leave a trace. Leadership tends to leave a trace, and people respond to those qualities instinctively. What's interesting is that the most attractive men often don't appear obsessed with proving themselves. In fact, the opposite is usually true. They don't desperately seek approval. They don't constantly advertise their value. They don't need everyone in the room to recognize them. Instead, they seem comfortable in their own skin, and that comfort creates a powerful effect. Because genuine confidence is quiet. Insecurity is often loud. Many men spend years trying to appear confident when the real goal should be becoming confident. Women are remarkably good at sensing the difference. The eighth sign is when a woman assumes you already have options. This one surprises many men because it often sounds like teasing. She might say things such as, "You probably have women messaging you all the time. I bet girls flirt with you constantly. You probably hear this all the time." Or perhaps, "I'm sure you don't have trouble meeting women." Many men laugh these comments off, but psychologically, these statements can reveal perception. Women often associate emotional confidence with desirability. A man who seems relaxed, secure, and comfortable with himself frequently gives the impression that other women find him attractive too. And here's the fascinating part. The perception often matters more than the reality. You may genuinely believe you're average. You may think women rarely notice you, yet your behavior communicates something entirely different, because attraction is influenced by emotional signals. A man who constantly seeks validation often creates tension. A man who feels comfortable regardless of approval creates curiosity. One feels needy, the other feels grounded, and grounded confidence tends to be highly attractive. There's an important lesson here. The goal is not to pretend you have options. The goal is to build a life that doesn't depend on external validation. Because when your happiness isn't controlled by approval, people naturally feel that energy. And attractive energy is often less about what you say and more about how you carry yourself. Now let's talk about the 9th sign. This is the sign many men struggle to believe, even when it's happening right in front of them. Women become nervous around men they're genuinely attracted to. Think about that for a moment. Many men assume attraction should always make a woman more confident, but that's not how human psychology works. Attraction creates emotional stakes, and emotional stakes create vulnerability. Suddenly, the outcome matters. Suddenly, the person's opinion matters. Suddenly, rejection feels meaningful. That's true for men, and it's true for women. A woman who genuinely likes you might laugh more than usual. She might stumble over her words. She might lose her train of thought. She might become unexpectedly quiet. She might tease you because she's nervous. She might become overly aware of her appearance. She might keep adjusting her hair. She might seem completely different from how she behaves with everyone else. And many men misread this. They assume confidence equals attraction, and nervousness equals disinterest. But often the opposite is true. Let's look at a simple example. Imagine a woman speaking casually with 10 different people. She's relaxed. She's confident. She's comfortable. Then the man she genuinely likes enters the conversation. Suddenly, her behavior changes. Not because she's uninterested, because she cares. And caring creates pressure. One of the biggest mistakes people make in dating is assuming attraction always looks smooth and polished. Sometimes attraction looks awkward. Sometimes attraction looks uncertain. Sometimes attraction looks like two people trying not to reveal how much they care. That's why emotional intelligence matters so much. When you learn to recognize nervous attraction, you stop misinterpreting every imperfect interaction as rejection. You begin seeing human behavior more accurately. Now let's step back and look at the bigger picture. Every sign we've discussed today shares one thing in common. None of them involve dramatic declarations. None of them require a woman to walk across a room and announce her feelings. Instead, they reveal something much more realistic. Attraction usually begins quietly. It begins with attention, with curiosity, with awareness, with emotional investment. And that's exactly why so many men miss it. They've been taught to expect attraction to look obvious. They've been conditioned to believe interest should arrive with flashing lights and unmistakable certainty. Real life rarely works that way. In reality, attraction often develops through small moments that seem insignificant at the time. A glance, a smile, a remembered detail, a question, a shared laugh, a seat chosen beside yours, a nervous reaction, a lingering conversation. Each moment alone may seem meaningless, but together, they form a pattern. And patterns tell the real story. The men who understand attraction best aren't necessarily the most attractive men in the room. They're the men who pay attention. They're the men who notice. They're the men who understand that human behavior is communication. And perhaps the most important lesson of all is this. Stop obsessing over whether every woman likes you. That's not the goal. The goal is becoming the kind of person who creates genuine connection. When you focus entirely on getting validation, you become blind to authentic attraction. But when you focus on presence, confidence, emotional intelligence, and meaningful connection, something interesting happens. You become more aware, more relaxed, more attractive naturally. And suddenly, the signs that once seemed invisible become much easier to recognize. Before we finish, I want to leave you with a question. Think back over your life. Was there ever a moment when you later discovered a woman liked you, but you completely missed the signs at the time? Maybe it happened in school, maybe at work, maybe through a friendship that later revealed something deeper. Looking back now, what clues were there that you couldn't see then? Share your story in the comments because those experiences help everyone learn. And if you enjoyed this conversation about female psychology, attraction, confidence, and relationships, make sure you subscribe and join our growing community. We're going to continue exploring the hidden dynamics that shape attraction, emotional connection, and modern relationships. And some of the upcoming discussions may completely change the way you see human behavior. Until next time, remember this. Attraction is rarely as complicated as people think. Most of the time, the signs are already there. The challenge isn't finding them. The challenge is learning how to notice them.